The wind cut low across the empty alley, pushing fine white dust into the corners of rusted dumpsters and broken pallets. A street lamp flickered overhead, casting a dull amber glow onto a patch of churned snow near the loading dock of a shuttered bakery. It was early. Too early for most of the city to be awake. But the silence wasn't still. It was waiting. From beneath a sagging pile of cardboard, something moved. A paw, too wide for a house cat, too hesitant for a dog, pressed into the frost. Another followed. And then a body emerged, small, mottled, with fur clumped by ice. It limped, dragging one hind leg through the slush, stopping every few steps to breathe, as though breath itself was scarce. A man rounded the corner, hood up, coffee steaming in his gloved hand. He nearly stepped past it. At first, it looked like a cat, just another stray, scrounging for warmth or something soft enough to curl against. But then it turned, and he saw the tail, short, stubby, not broken, but born that way. The ears, tipped with black tufts, the paws cracked and crusted in frost, trembled in the snow. He knelt, slowly. "Hey there, buddy!" The creature didn't run. Its breath came in sharp bursts, but its eyes, yellow-green, rimmed in red, held his. Not fear, not quite. Something quieter, as if it had made a choice, to approach, to trust. And in that moment, under the blinking streetlight and the brittle hum of power lines, the man realized something that felt like a memory. This wasn't just a chance meeting, it was a crossing of species, of wounds, of two lost things who no longer wanted to be alone. Thomas Reilly wasn't the kind of man who believed in omens, but that winter had a strange pull to it, too quiet, like the air was holding its breath. He worked third shift at the city's public works department, driving a snowplow through sleeping neighborhoods and salting the overpasses. He liked the solitude, no one to talk to, no one to disappoint. Just the rumble of the engine and the clean mechanical scrape of steel on asphalt. At 38, Thomas moved like someone who had grown tired early. Broad shoulders, sunken eyes, hands scarred from years of wrenching bolts and lifting metal. He lived alone in a drafty duplex on the edge of town, where the streetlights gave way to cattails and power lines. No pets, no visitors, just the soft hum of a space heater and the clock's steady tick echoing in an empty kitchen. His brother Jamie had filled the silence once, a loud laugh, fast-talking, always the dreamer. But Jamie had been gone 3 winters now, lost to a needle in a friend's basement. And since then, Thomas had stopped expecting good things to stay. That morning, just before sunrise, he walked home the long way. Something about the stillness, the cold, bruised sky, made him crave distance. He turned down an alley behind an abandoned bakery, the old Stein's place, where he used to buy apple fritters as a kid. The windows were blacked out now, signs torn down, but the building still held a smell, yeast and cinnamon layered beneath mold and time. He almost didn't see it, a flicker near the dumpster. Too small to be a person, too sluggish to be a rat. He stepped closer, squinted through the gloom. A kitten? No, the shape was wrong. The ears tall, triangular, with tips like brushes, the tail thick, cropped like it had never fully grown, and the eyes wild, not from fear, but origin, untamed. Thomas crouched, breath puffing white. "Hey, you all right?" The animal lifted its head but didn't move. Its body shook, every inhale ragged. It shifted, tried to stand, and collapsed again. Blood stained the snow beneath its paws, tiny blooms of red against the white. "Jesus," Thomas murmured. He reached into his coat, pulled off the flannel overshirt he'd worn since midnight, and slowly approached. "It's okay. I got you." The Bobcat, because that's what it had to be, he knew now, didn't resist. When he wrapped it in the warm cloth, it didn't hiss, didn't claw. It only let out a tiny, broken sound, half sigh, half cry, and pressed its face into the fabric. He held it there, heart hammering against ribs that hadn't felt this open in years, a wild animal, and yet it leaned into him. He could have turned away, left it there, and walked home like none of it had happened. But something about the way its body curled into the fold of his arms, like it had done this before, trusted before, refused to let go. So, Thomas didn't either. The heat inside Thomas's coat faded fast on the walk home. The little body pressed to his chest was barely warmer than the air around them. He moved quickly now, heart thudding, his boots crunching through ice-glazed sidewalks. The street was still empty, save for a passing delivery truck, its headlights sweeping wide and catching the shimmer of frost on Thomas's eyelashes. Inside the house, he didn't bother flipping on lights. He moved by muscle memory, guiding them into the garage, the only room with a concrete floor and a space heater he used when fixing the car. He set the bundle gently into an old laundry basket, lined with an old towel, then closed the door behind him and knelt beside it. The Bobcat didn't move at first. Its breath was shallow, little clouds rising from a nose ringed with crusted dirt. Its front paw, he could see it better now, was split open, raw from cold, the pads blackened at the edges. "God," he whispered. He grabbed a bowl, filled it with warm tap water, and placed it nearby. Then a can of tuna, something he hadn't touched in years, left over from a camping trip that never happened. He cracked it open, the scent sharp in the cold air. The Bobcat didn't react. Thomas sat down on the cold floor beside the basket. "It's food," he said, as if the thing could understand. "You've got to eat, little guy." Still nothing. He pulled out his phone. Searched. Stubby tail, tufted ears. Cat-like, but not cat. The results hit him like a slap. Lynx rufus, a bobcat, native to the region, solitary, skittish, not safe to handle, not a pet. He leaned back, rubbing the edge of his jaw with his knuckles. His brother would have laughed at this. "Of course you'd bring home a damn bobcat, Tommy," he could almost hear Jamie say. "Can't fix your own life, so you fix the bleeding things." He looked at the animal again. It was trying. One eye fluttered open. The nose twitched. And, slowly, trembling as if the weight of movement was too much, it leaned forward and sniffed the tuna. It licked once, then again. Thomas exhaled a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. That night, he barely slept. He stayed beside the heater in the garage, wrapped in a blanket, watching the rise and fall of a ribcage so thin it barely moved the towel beneath it. At one point, the bobcat opened its eyes, not wide, just a sliver, and it looked at him. Not with fear. With familiarity. Thomas looked away. He couldn't afford to see himself in those eyes. Not yet. That night, the wind howled through the gutters like something hollowed out and hunting. Thomas could hear it even from his bedroom, the way it rattled the siding and scraped against the warped window panes. But louder than that was the silence from the garage. He hadn't heard Ash move in hours. At midnight, barefoot and still in his flannel pants, Thomas crept down the stairs and across the narrow kitchen. He opened the garage door with a quiet creak, wincing at the sound. Inside, the heater buzzed faintly, casting a dull, orange halo over the small basket. Ash lay curled tightly, face buried beneath one foreleg. For a moment, Thomas thought the worst. He took a cautious step closer. Then a twitch, a breath. Ash shifted, licking at his wounded paw and letting out a low, warbling chirp, a sound both kitten-like and ancient. It settled over Thomas like snow. He crouched beside him, not reaching out, just watching. This wasn't safety, not yet, but it was shelter. It was warm. Still, something gnawed at him. He rose the next morning with a tightness in his chest, the kind he used to feel the day after Jamie relapsed. An ache that didn't have a name but clung just beneath the ribs. In the kitchen he burned his toast, poured his coffee wrong, spilled sugar across the counter. His hands weren't steady. In the garage, Ash was awake, but still didn't stand. The paw looked worse, swollen at the joints, the blackened pads stiff around the edges. Thomas sat down and picked up his phone. He scrolled through contacts, paused, then dialed. A voice answered after 2 rings. Dr. Klossner? Thomas cleared his throat. Hey, this is Reilly. I know you don't do wildlife, but I've got something. A bobcat. Young, hurt. A long pause. You keeping a bobcat, Reilly? I didn't exactly plan it, he explained. Briefly, honestly, Dr. Klossner sighed. Bring him in. Quiet hour is noon. Side entrance. Thomas drove slow. Every turn of the wheel tighter than it needed to be. Ash sat in the back seat, tucked inside a crate he'd lined with an old sleeping bag. The animal didn't fuss, didn't growl, just watched the world pass with wide, unblinking eyes. At the clinic, they kept to themselves. No lobby wait, no clipboard. Klossner examined Ash with firm but gentle hands. Frostbite on the paw, maybe mild hypothermia, but he's alert. Eating? Yeah. Good. It's a miracle he survived this long. They don't usually. What do I do? Keep doing what you're doing. Keep him warm. Keep him fed. Don't let him roam. And don't get too attached. Thomas looked at Ash. The way he pressed his head into the crook of the vet's elbow. How he closed his eyes. Not to sleep, but as if to hide. Too late for that, he thought. They drove home in silence. Snow flurries had started to fall again, soft as breath. Back in the garage, Ash limped from the crate and headed straight for the basket. He paused, then looked back at Thomas. And for the first time, Thomas didn't see a wild animal in survival. He saw a child, raw, wounded, wondering if this place, this warmth, this man, might be safe. Thomas sat at the edge of the garage, watching condensation build on the windows. Outside, dawn was trying to break through a sky smeared with grey. The space heater buzzed softly, casting an orange glow over the garage walls and the motionless shape nestled in the towel-lined basket. He hadn't named it yet. That felt like a line he shouldn't cross. But in the stillness between the churning thoughts and the soft whir of warm air, he couldn't stop seeing Jamie's face. That grin full of mischief, the freckles across his nose, the memory, so vivid now, of a 10-year-old Jamie bringing home a squirrel wrapped in his hoodie. Its tail half gone, its eyes wide with terror. He fell from the tree, Jamie had said, voice shaking. We can fix him, right? Their mother had smiled, but shaken her head. Some things belong to the wild. They kept it warm in a shoebox for 3 nights. It died the 4th. Thomas remembered how Jamie cried, not loud. Not tantrum-like, just quiet. That unbearable kind of heartbreak that cracks something you never name. Now here he was, 3 decades later, different animal, same ache. He glanced at the bobcat, still tucked in tightly. It had eaten half the tuna in the night. That was something. He crawled closer, one knee creaking as it hit the floor. The bobcat stirred, shifting its weight, and for the first time, Thomas saw the full extent of its injury. Frostbitten toes, one nail cracked at the base. Its back leg still trembled when it moved, but it didn't lash out. Instead, it blinked slowly. And something passed between them, Not recognition, not quite, but something like a question, like it was still deciding. Thomas reached for his phone again and called the nearest wildlife rescue center. The woman who answered sounded kind but tired. "We're full," she said. "Emergency cases only. If he's stable, just keep him warm, hydrated. We'll call if space opens up." He stared at the phone after the call ended. That was it? Just wait? His hands clenched around the phone. He looked at the animal again. "You need a name," he muttered. "I can't keep calling you Hay." It shifted, one ear flicking as though listening. Thomas considered. "Ash," he said finally. "You look like Ash. Grey, dusty, left behind." The bobcat didn't move, but its breath seemed to deepen. "Ash," he repeated softly now. "All right, then." He spent the rest of the morning in the garage, fetching fresh water, warming small pieces of chicken from the freezer, setting up a cardboard barrier around the basket. He used old towels, stacked one over the other, to build a wall of comfort. Around noon, the sun peeked through the clouds, a single shaft landing on Ash's fur. It shimmered, and for the first time, Thomas noticed how beautiful the animal was, the way the spots rippled down its sides, the hint of reddish gold along its spine, the tiny whiskers bent but still twitching. He sat down again and leaned against the wall. The heater clicked off. Silence fell. Ash raised his head. Their eyes met. Not like strangers, like survivors. The third morning came with sun. Not warmth. January wasn't kind, but light, slanting in through the garage window and catching on the thin sheen of dust that floated lazily above the floor. Ash blinked into it, eyes slow to adjust. Then he stretched. It was a clumsy, tender thing, one paw, then the other, extended forward, claws flexing slightly. His back arched, tail twitching, breath puffing out in soft little huffs. The movement made him wince, but he didn't retreat. Instead, he took a step, then another. Thomas, seated at his workbench pretending to organize socket wrenches, froze. He watched in silence as Ash padded across the room, unsteady but determined. The wounded paw hovered slightly above the ground, but the others carried him forward. He sniffed the corners, rubbed his face along the edge of an old boot, sat beside the space heater and tilted his chin into the glow like a cat born for luxury. "You're getting too comfortable," Thomas said, half smiling. Ash glanced at him and blinked, slow and deliberate, as if to say, "So are you." That day became a rhythm. Thomas worked on his truck's wiring while Ash explored, stopping occasionally to test boundaries, crawling halfway under a shelf, knocking over a tin of nails with a crash that made them both flinch. He pawed at a loose string from the sleeping bag, chewing and growling and flopping onto his back in a sprawl of clumsy limbs. Thomas laughed aloud, a sound he hadn't heard from his own chest in months. It surprised him, how light it felt, how wrong not to have it echoed by Jamie's voice. When he brought in a small bowl of scrambled egg, Ash approached and sniffed it suspiciously. After a moment's hesitation, he ate, carefully, neatly, licking the bowl clean. Then he sat back and began grooming himself with the intense focus of someone reclaiming a dignity they hadn't known they'd lost. The crate, once sanctuary, became less relevant. Ash took to curling beside the heater instead, eyes always half-lidded, ears flicking at every creak and gust of wind. At dusk, Thomas sat beside him, cross-legged on the concrete. He held a screwdriver in one hand, but it dangled uselessly. "You're not supposed to be tame," he murmured. Ash, half asleep, let out a small chirrup in response. Thomas shook his head. I know, you're not mine, you're not even meant to stay." But he didn't say it like a warning. He said it like a promise he already knew he wouldn't keep. Later that night, when the sky turned lavender with moonlight and the air cracked cold against the window panes, Thomas opened the garage door for a moment, just to feel the air, just to remind himself of the world beyond the walls. Ash limped to the threshold and stopped. Snow dusted the ground like powdered glass. The wind carried the distant howl of something wild. A fox, maybe, or something lonelier. Ash didn't step out. He just stood there, watching, listening. Then he turned and returned to the heater. Thomas closed the door gently behind him. In the dim light, the man and the bobcat settled again into their quiet. Two beings from different worlds, each holding space for the other, each unsure of what tomorrow would bring. But tonight? Tonight was warm. The knock came just after noon. 3 sharp raps against the front door. Thomas flinched. He wasn't expecting anyone. He hadn't had a visitor in weeks, maybe months, not counting the occasional delivery guy. Ash stirred in the laundry basket he'd adopted as a midday perch, his tufted ears swiveling toward the sound. Thomas rose slowly, wiping his hands on a rag. His pulse had quickened. He didn't know why, but something in his gut tightened. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was fear. That this fragile pocket of peace he and Ash had found was about to fracture. At the door stood a woman in a thick canvas jacket with a state wildlife emblem stitched on the sleeve. Her dark hair was tucked beneath a knit cap, and her breath clouded in the cold. "Thomas Reilly?" she asked, voice brisk but not unkind. "Yeah," he said, already bracing. "Officer Carla Monroe, Wildlife Services. Got a call from Dr. Klossner." Thomas nodded once, stepping aside. "You better come in." Inside, the warmth hit like a soft wave. The smell of coffee lingered in the air, mingling with the faint scent of cedar from the garage where Ash rested. "I understand you've been sheltering a bobcat," Monroe said, glancing around. Thomas folded his arms. "Injured. Found him nearly frozen behind the old bakery. He wouldn't have lasted another night." "I believe you," she said simply. "And I'm not here to penalize you. This sort of situation, it's more common than you'd think." Thomas exhaled, some tension loosening in his shoulders. "So what happens now?" Monroe looked toward the garage door. "May I?" He hesitated, then nodded. She followed him into the garage. Ash was alert, but calm, lying near the heater. When the door opened, he lifted his head, blinking slowly. His gaze flicked to Thomas first, then to Monroe. She crouched, observing quietly. "He's bonded to you." Thomas said nothing. He just watched Ash's tail flick across the floor like a feather in slow motion. "We've got a place downstate," she continued. "A sanctuary, proper enclosures, medical care, space to roam. He'd be safe, but not wild, not anymore." Thomas swallowed. "He's not a pet." "No," she agreed. "But he's not what he was either. Frostbite, early bonding, it changes them. They don't always go back, not fully." She stood. "We can come for him tomorrow morning. Give you the night to say goodbye." Thomas looked at Ash. The bobcat met his eyes, and in that moment Thomas felt something shift deep in his chest. Some tether pulled taut and trembling. After Monroe left, the house felt too quiet again. The shadows in the corners seemed longer. The heater's hum was suddenly the loudest thing in the world. Thomas sat in the garage, elbows on his knees. Ash lay beside him, body still, save for the slow rise and fall of breath. "You know," Thomas said softly, "I told myself I wasn't keeping you." Ash didn't move. "Wasn't naming you, wasn't getting attached, but I lied." He reached out and laid a hand near Ash's paw, close, but not touching. You made me remember what it feels like to care." Ash didn't make a sound, just scooted the tiniest bit closer until his fur brushed the side of Thomas's hand. That night, Thomas didn't close the garage door. He lay on a pile of old blankets beside the heater. Ash curled near his ribs. He didn't sleep much, didn't want to, because tomorrow would come. And with it, the question no one else could answer. Do you let go of what healed you because it belongs to the wild, or do you fight to keep what shouldn't have stayed? The morning came blue and still, no wind, no birdsong, just the hush of snow hanging in the air like breath not yet exhaled. Thomas stood at the kitchen sink, coffee cooling in his hands. He hadn't slept. Ash had curled beside him through the night, paws twitching in dreams, body pressed against Thomas's chest like it had always belonged there. He kept looking at the clock. 7:41. Monroe would arrive at 8. He moved slowly, deliberately, as if the world would pause if he didn't rush. In the garage, Ash blinked awake, stretched, and gave a raspy chirp before sitting up with surprising grace. The swelling in his paw had lessened. The limp, while still there, was fainter, but the eyes, that slow blink, that searching gaze, they were the same. Thomas knelt beside him. "I guess this is it," he whispered. Ash tilted his head. "I don't know if you understand. Maybe you do, but they'll take care of you, better than I can." Ash didn't move. "You don't belong in garages. You belong under stars, in forests, chasing things." But even as he said it, Thomas felt the words catch in his throat. Because Ash had belonged here too, had brought life back into a house gone quiet, had reminded Thomas what it meant to show up for something fragile, something wounded, something wild. A soft knock. Thomas didn't move at first, just breathed, then stood. Monroe waited on the porch, bundled and solemn. Behind her, a van with the state seal idled in the driveway. She gave a small nod. "You ready?" Thomas opened the garage door. Ash was sitting by the heater, but he rose slowly when the door swung wide. He didn't bolt, didn't hiss, just stood there, watching. Monroe crouched and placed the open carrier on the floor. It was padded, clean, warm. Thomas walked over, knelt again. This time he reached out. Ash leaned into the hand, nose brushing his knuckles. No growl, no flinch, just trust. Thomas swallowed. "Thank you," he said softly. "For coming to me." He scooped Ash up gently, the bobcat tucked into his arms like memory, like breath. At the van he hesitated. Monroe didn't rush him. He placed Ash in the carrier, slow, like laying down a chapter he hadn't finished reading. The door clicked shut. The van pulled away minutes later, tires whispering over snow. Thomas didn't wave, just stood there until the red taillights disappeared into the trees. Then the silence came, and stayed. That night, he left the garage door cracked open, just a little, and by the heater he left a towel, folded, waiting, just in case. The days turned soft again, winter easing its grip just barely, the kind of thaw that left gutters dripping and tree limbs snapping under the weight of old ice. Thomas went back to his routines. Slow mornings, coffee in hand, the occasional job when the phone rang. But something had shifted. The house wasn't as silent as it used to be. The heater hummed like it was keeping time with another heartbeat. And sometimes, in the early hours, he'd find himself turning toward the garage, expecting to see golden eyes blinking back at him. Then one morning in late February he saw them. Pawprints, faint but fresh, pressed into the snow just beyond the edge of the porch. 4 perfect indentations, spaced wide, deliberate, not a house cat, not a dog, something lighter, quieter. And there, Resting against the doorframe where the flannel shirt had once hung was a single object, a feather, not dropped, placed. Thomas crouched slowly, fingertips brushing the edge of the print. Still cold, still sharp. He followed the trail with his eyes, but it vanished into the thicket just beyond the backyard fence, where the woods began again. He didn't speak, just smiled. A slow, quiet smile that cracked something soft open in his chest. Ash had returned, or passed through, or left a message in the only way he knew how. Some bonds don't ask for forever, just for one moment. One winter, one home. If this story touched your heart, stay close. Here on Paw Prints and Stories we believe some bonds never end.